Let's now speak to Goolam Ballim, Chief Economist at Standard Bank Group. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Just give us a sense then in terms of what your thoughts are of this budget in Gauteng.
Look, overall fairly sensitive in terms of its allocations, meaning it prioritizes frontline services such as health and education. They take the lion's share cumulatively of the provincial allocation. But I'm reminded, at first year economics, one is taught that society wants to see what it is paying for and it must approve of it. That means transparency with regard to the actual allocations comes to mind. And in this respect, while we take cue from the provincial signals and the budget speech, that there's this commitment to transparency and attempt to enhance the quality of spending, particularly general expenditure. I think the public would still be a little bit circumspect that there isn't the type of quality and efficiencies in provincial spending that is desirable. And I think the parlous state of the province speaks to that.
And I'm going to come back to some of the utterances that were made by the MEC, particularly around transparency, as you've also just alluded to. But how concerned are we that this budget is less by 51 billion rand?
Look, this idea of fiscal conservatism was already tone set by the national budget, Minister Gonangwana, not too long ago. So this idea that South Africa, in a sense, is cash hamstrung, feeds into the provincial budget. And I get other provincial budgets are going to have similar echoes. The provincial allocation, meaning that which is transferred from national government to the province, grows at around 4% per year over the medium term. So that's roughly at around the inflation rate. So there's no meaningful real increase, in other words, increase above inflation. Yet expenses on the part of the province is certainly above inflation, generally speaking. And in that respect, there needs to be some reconciliation. There is some illusion that they'll attempt to find new revenue sources. Of course, being both referee and player, the province can be artful and creative in finding new revenue sources. But as said, taxpayers are quite burdened. And with a VAT increase likely to come in force on the 1st of May, aggregate demand in the economy throughout is going to be pressured. So I think there's limits to the manner in which the province can seek to extract additional revenues out of society. The tone that certainly has been set following the debacles in Cape Town surrounding Budget 1, Budget 2, or at the national level, certainly signals that provinces too are going to credibly have to tighten their belts, have to extract greater efficiency gains, and certainly the MEC was articulate in this respect.
Just going back to some of his utterances, he has committed to good governance, transparency and accountability for public funds. I would imagine that as this budget, like the national budget, will go through its own systems of legislation before it is finally approved, these are key indicators of a successful, almost like economically thriving provincial government, one would imagine.
I'm not at all going to be cynical about the MEC's intent to clean governance and to quality spend. And I'm sure he's certainly integrous in those remarks. But ultimately, I think many citizens would argue when they look at the extent of crumbling infrastructure, when we judge the outcomes of schooling and literacy and numeracy, one has to wonder whether we're actually getting a quality outcome, whether there's a general and genuine sense of governance enveloping the type of spend that is undertaken. Quite simply, are there productivity measures? Are there targets with regard to literacy and numeracy levels? Are there some quality measures and productivity measures with regard to the envelope of the healthcare system? And in this respect, I know it is not necessarily the focus of the budget and the budget speech, and also the budget orientation. It's a distributed government model, and other subsections of provincial government take accountability for this. So the accountability is a bottom-up as well as a top-down. And bottom-up, it is where we may flounder, meaning the various government departments and sub-ministries and the manner in which they conduct provincial affairs. it is the transparency in those areas that I think is often bereft of the light of day, and even transparency in terms of budget signals and numeracy with respect to the budget doesn't necessarily translate into what we see on the ground.
And just finally, Goolam, we know, of course, that a large chunk of the allocation does come from Treasury for the Gauteng, province. I want your thoughts around this Gauteng Investment Conference that is earmarked to start in April. It will be a first of its kind, I believe, for Gauteng, as the minister has said. Interestingly saying that they're expecting to attract 800 billion rand in investment commitments over a period of 3 to 5 years.
So just with regard to your opening reference, yes, 95% of the province's revenue is garnered from National Treasury. Now, there's the National Revenue Fund, so they're significantly dependent on National Treasury. But that also means it gives National Treasury some capacity to oversee the funds and to call for some level of accountability. Yeah, I'm going to be a little bit cynical for a moment and say I would prefer that we in South Africa do not have investment conferences, but instead if we had governance conferences. In other words, if we were to open up government to greater scrutiny, greater forensic inspection, if we focus on enhancing the rule of law, in other words, a close cousin of the investment climate. Now, I know when we speak in the stone, many are disagreeable, or they not really subscribe to this thought, or it seems woolly to talk about the rule of law and governance. But the reason why we emphasize this quite simply is the rule of law, governance, aggregate accountability, those items form the bedrock of any opportunity to invest. Investors look to the rule of law as the foundation stone upon which to invest. So having an investment climate where you don't necessarily appreciate or interrogate the rules of the game, the extent of governance and commitment in which you secure for a return, I think then it just bedeviled. It's in a sense putting the cart before the horse. Sounds abstract, but we underscore this as being foundational.
Governance over investment conferences. Thank you so much, Goolam, for those words. Really do appreciate it. Goolam Ballim, there's the chief economist.